Welcome to In the Name of the Law, with your host Lisa Speaker from Speaker Law Firm. Joining her today is Stephen Sinas from Sinas Dramis Law Firm, Amy Bailey from Bailey and Terranova Attorneys at Law, and Mary Chartier from Chartier Nyamfukudza PLC. Now, let's discuss some remarkable stories and real cases.
Welcome to In the Name of the Law, a legal talk show about real people and real legal problems. Today's episode will meet a family who was saved by the no-fault system after their son was catastrophically injured in an automobile accident. We'll also learn about how divorced parents and their children can survive their holidays. And we'll hear about a riveting criminal case where a man was charged with threatening a judge on Facebook. So stay tuned.
In the name of criminal defense.
Hello and welcome back to In the Name of the Law. We're here with Mary Chartier and Chartier Nyamfukudza to talk about the First Amendment in criminal cases. So where do you see the interaction of the First Amendment coming up in the criminal cases?
Where we frequently see it coming up is in a lot of protest cases. We've handled a lot of cases where people have been protesting, for example, fracking or particular actions of the government, and we've defended a lot of those individuals. We're on a First Amendment strike force where that is something that we like to jump in and help people do because obviously we feel so strongly, as every citizen should.
So let's talk about that. So somebody's out there with a sign picketing, yelling, and then they get arrested because they're
loud and boisterous.
Right, loud and boisterous.
That's verbiage.
Right,
Yeah.
That's frequently what
Is that
they're
a crime to be
charged
loud
with.
and boisterous?
It is a crime. I know.
Conduct.
We should all be getting tickets every day for being loud and boisterous.
Do not come to my house.
Right? If you're disturbing individuals, what happens frequently is, for example, there'll be a meeting or there might be a function going on, and you'll have people and they'll claim they're disrupting the meeting or disrupting the function. Or you'll have people protesting, for example, at the Capitol or at particular events that are going on. You also see it sometimes where someone might be arresting someone on the street or stopping. We had a situation where a young man was stopped by the police, and someone who is a very involved citizen said, I'm going to observe what's going on, and I'm going to make sure that the interaction between this young man and the police is constitutional. And the police kept telling her, ma'am, you're interfering with what's going on. When in reality, she wasn't. She was very far away. She could still hear and see what was going on, but she certainly couldn't reach out and touch someone. She got arrested.
But how is she expressing her First Amendment right? She was being quiet though, right?
Well, she was, but then when the police officer said, what are you doing? It's not only about speech, right? The First Amendment protects all different aspects of an individual's, conduct. And she said she was observing what was going on, and then the police officer said, you're interfering. We argued, and that case got dismissed, but we argued to a judge and we were arguing to the prosecutor it never should have been issued in the first place.
So I heard about a case where a man posted, let's just call it, he was accused of posting a threat on Facebook, and he was charged with a crime. Can you tell us about that case?
Yeah, this happened, not in this county.
Right.
And that's how the judge perceived it, but the jury decided otherwise.
And I said a threat, but I mean, obviously the jury did not perceive it as a threat. It was, he was being critical of the judge, right? I mean, this is a really sad case where
a child had died.
Child had died, and he was upset because the judge had allowed the child to go to the other home, right?
That's right.
He was really dissatisfied with actions that the court system had taken, and he believed it was his responsibility as a parent and as a citizen to post on social media his viewpoint about what was going on. I think what was unique is because it really targeted a particular judge in terms of saying this judge's name and talking about this judge. I think the court system reacted quite a bit differently than if, for example, if it had been one of us.
Because death threats, I mean, we've even received those.
Right.
So, you don't hear us running off to the police and people getting charged with threatening us. So.
Wow.
Criminal defense attorneys, I mean, we get people saying nasty things about us all the time. No one likes us generally until they need us. And a lot of people don't understand our role in making sure that constitutional rights are adhered to. That, I mean, as Takura likes to say, our job is the only one
in the Constitution.
Right. And so the person, for example, in a case where there's a threat, whether it's to the criminal defense attorney or to the judge or whoever in the system, they have to show that they were actually felt threatened, they felt their life was in danger, and then that triggers the not the crime necessarily, but the charges.
It's not necessarily
crime.
Yeah, it's not necessarily, I think, that the person feels their life is in danger, but it's a fairly high threshold. This and I believe, again, I followed it to the extent that I could. I mean, I believe the judge probably really genuinely felt threatened and was afraid about what was going on. But it does appear that it certainly was handled differently because it was a judge. And the bond, that gentleman had a $500,000 bond for a misdemeanor. Right, for malicious use of a telecommunications device. Right. $500,000 bond is something that you would
on
see.
Capital offenses.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, on the most serious offenses, certainly not on a misdemeanor. I've never seen someone with a bond
Absolutely
that high
not.
on a misdemeanor.
So I understand that he was acquitted, but how do you defend these cases where your clients are expressing their First Amendment rights and are being charged with a crime?
It's interesting. Sometimes when you get the case and you get to sit down with a prosecutor, you really can appeal to their duty as a prosecutor is to defend individuals' constitutional rights as well. I mean, obviously significantly different than our duty, but they're not supposed to be trampling on an individual's rights. So some prosecutors, when they really look at the facts of the case, will agree and will dismiss outright. We've had that where people have been engaged in so-called begging on the street, right? And when we've said this is constitutionally protected activity, and prosecutors have looked at that and said, you're right. Right? Courts have spoken. I may not like it, but I'm certainly not going to violate the Constitution. Other times, there's differences of opinion.
That's right.
Judges, it depends on your judge on whether they will dismiss. Usually we'll bring a motion to dismiss saying this is protected First Amendment activity. Juries are actually much more inclined to really respect that right and to acquit based on the First Amendment. It's really fascinating, and it's great to see when juries really wind up taking their role so seriously, and it's really heartening.
But again, let's not forget, why did they cross the pond all the way from a place you love, I know, right, London, and come over here, right? Yeah. The First Amendment, that's what it's all about.
It's pretty ingrained in our culture, I think, right? Any other cases that you've worked on regarding the First Amendment issues?
We had one where an individual wasn't protesting formal activity, right? So it wasn't fracking or government activity, but just didn't like the police. So that was one where when he would see the police interact with a citizen, not only would he observe, but he would like to shout, frequently using some profane terms, about what was going on. And that's a case where he was charged with loud or boisterous behavior. And then what was interesting in that as well is when he didn't originally take the plea offer, they upped that and they added a few additional charges. That's a case where the First Amendment really does protect what he's doing. There's lots of United States Supreme Court case law talking about police officers especially have to have a thicker skin than even the average citizen. So someone driving by and saying, you know, F the police, we might not like that, but it is constitutionally protected activity. And that is what our forefounders, you know, really, as Takur said, why they crossed the pond.
Well, thank you for reminding us of our First Amendment rights today.
Thanks, Lisa. If you're interested in learning more about the First Amendment or other constitutional law issues or criminal defense issues, check us out. We are Constitutional Defenders. We are on cndefenders.com, iTunes, or any other podcast platform.
In the Name of Criminal Defense is brought to you by Chartier Nyamfukudza, PLC. In the Name of Family Law.
Good morning and welcome to In the Name of the Law. Today I have with me Amy Bailey and Bailey Terranova, who are family law attorneys at the law firm of Bailey and Terranova. So when parents are separated, how does that impact the holidays for the families?
The court and the front of the court have developed a standard schedule. Each county has their own schedule, but they're pretty similar. They alternate the holidays so that the children are with one parent for 1 year on Thanksgiving, and then the next year they'll be with the other parent for Thanksgiving. And throughout the year they're alternating so that each parent equally has time with the children.
And can the parents deviate from that set schedule by the friend of the court?
They certainly can. Again, that has to be by agreement by both parties if they are going to deviate. But that is encouraged. Certain families have special traditions that they do on Christmas Eve or on Christmas. Parents are free to come up with their own agreements. There's some families that the extended family on one side always celebrates Christmas Eve and the other side always celebrates Christmas on Christmas Day. There's nothing wrong with deviating from that schedule and continuing that tradition.
A lot of families like to travel during the holidays. How do families now adjust to that reality when they are no longer living in the same house?
That's a very common issue that comes up in our cases. A lot of front of the courts have Thanksgiving where it's going to be a 4 or 5 day holiday. That doesn't change in between the parents that long weekend. It stays with one parent, then the other parent has the children, so it's a little easier to travel during that time. Christmas holiday is a little bit more difficult because typically the parents each have a week of the Christmas break, but they're also dividing Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So if there are extended families that live out of state, you're really going to need to work with that other parent to allow travel during that time. Maybe your agreement is 1 year you have the entire break, and then the other year the other parent has the entire break. There's lots of different ways you can work it out, and that's encouraged. We want the children to have a good time on the holiday. We also want the parents to have a good time on the holidays. So working together on how to best situate your family for the holidays really is the best situation.
Thank you, Erica. Amy, do you have any tips for parents for helping them to get through the holidays when they're facing this reality of not having their kids necessarily for the whole time?
Yes, and one thing I would like to say is that the holiday schedule that Erica was talking about, there may be some other holidays that are not dealt with in the reasonable rights policy that you want to have dealt with in your judgment. Just to make sure that you do not have an issue with that later on. The standard holidays that we deal with are Easter, Memorial Day, Labor Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, and New Year's. And so if there's a holiday in there that you would like to have dealt with, for example, I know we deal with children's birthdays, but if you want your birthday in there and then the other spouse's birthday in there, make sure it's in that judgment or that order so that you do not have a conflict regarding that holiday when it occurs. And we want to make sure that the parties are open with each other, that if, for example, there's a new step-parent that's involved and that step-parent has the opportunity on Christmas Eve, they always go to a certain event, and the child would enjoy that, then we want the one parent to be open to the idea of maybe modifying the schedule a little bit so that the child has the opportunity to attend those types of events and they know that the child would enjoy that. We also want to make sure that parents understand that, okay, you're not going to have your child on this holiday. It may be lonely for you the first time, but this is your opportunity to start a new chapter, to start new traditions for yourself, which is very important.
Now, are Mother's Day and Father's Day split just evenly between the mother and father?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a good point. Mother's Day is with the mom, Father's Day is always with the father, and then the other holidays, some counties have the holidays just during the day. Other counties have the holidays for the extended weekend. You need to make sure you educate yourself on what your specific order provides for your holidays so you don't end up in a situation where the day of the holiday you don't have your child you thought you did. I mean, I have clients call me and they're not even aware that they were supposed to have Labor Day weekend until after the fact when their ex calls and says, hey, you missed your holiday. What's up with that? And you don't want that situation because most likely they probably told the child that their parent wasn't there to exercise that with them. So you have to be educated on what your order says.
So if we're in the middle of a holiday and something happens, whether it's a party violates the order or there's a disagreement about pickup times or anything like that, and what I don't think the parties can go to court in the middle of a holiday week because, the courts are obviously taking time off too, as well as the attorneys. what can be done about that sort of situation?
And that happens in a lot of cases, Lisa. And you are correct that holidays are typically fall on a day when a court is closed. And so unfortunately, if a holiday is missed, there's not much you can do on that specific day. So we always encourage the parties to contact us or contact the friend of the court on the next business day, and you can file a formal written complaint that you have missed your holiday time and that you should receive make-up parenting time. But unfortunately, you're not going to receive immediate relief just based on the courts being closed or on vacation or unable to get your case heard immediately.
So if you are awarded makeup parenting time, let's say, for example, you were denied a couple of days during the Christmas holidays, is your makeup time going to be during the Christmas holidays the following year to give you that extra, the special holiday time?
The courts do accommodate, they do an in-kind exchange, meaning if you miss Christmas, you're going to get back Christmas. So you can't intentionally not turn a child over on Christmas thinking, oh, that parent will just make up a Saturday somewhere during the year. No, if you miss a certain holiday, you will receive make-up parenting time for that specific holiday.
Okay, and let's just touch briefly on summer parenting time schedules and how those work.
Each county, again, lays out what their standard schedule might be for summer, but I do find that parents are able to reach agreements or settle the disputes for more time during the summer. Some parents equally divide the summer on a week-on, week-off basis. Some have it where the non-custodial parent gets 1 week in the month of June, July, and August. It really is all over across the board on what the courts do, but it is a good time to try to resolve that to maximize the special summertime with each parent.
And if it's one of those situations where the parent gets one uninterrupted week for each month of the summer, how much in advance does that need to be planned out?
Again, that is something that each friend of the court has a certain deadline of when that parent is supposed to submit the week they want. Otherwise, it sometimes is contained in the specific order that says this parent gets the 3rd week of June every year, 2nd week of July every year.
All right. Well, thank you for this helpful information.
Thank you, Lisa.
In the Name of Family Law is brought to you by Bailey and Terranova Attorneys at Law. Go to WLAJ.com for more information on today's topics and to view other In the Name of the Law episodes. In the Name of Personal Injury Law.
Hello. Today we're going to talk about the realities of catastrophic injuries from motor vehicle accidents. I'm here today with Steve Sinas, who's a partner at the Sinas Dramis Law Firm, and he brought with him a couple of very special guests. Steve, would you introduce them?
Absolutely. I have Andrea and John Kenzer. They are technically former clients of the firm. Andrea is John's mother. John sustained catastrophic brain injuries in a motor vehicle crash. He's made an amazing recovery. Proud to have been his attorney. And we're here to talk more about John's story and how it plays into Michigan no-fault insurance and what that issue is all about.
And I noticed that there's a tablet or iPad in front of John.
Yes, that's right. And John, due to his brain injury, he can communicate, but he has a hard time verbalizing his words. So he has an iPad here through which he can communicate. John, how you doing today?
Good.
Nice.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
So, Andrea, could you tell us about the crash that caused your son's injuries?
Sure. Approximately 2002, a week before Thanksgiving in November, John was working part-time, taking college classes at Kendall because he wanted to be a cartoonist, and he played hockey a lot because he was a big hockey fan too. And he came home from playing hockey, hit black ice, his car hit a tree, and that was basically the start of John's really long road to recovery. So yeah, he was in the hospital in intensive care for probably a week. And then after he was out of critical care, then they put him I think he went to Kent Community Hospital.
How long was it before he came home?
6 months.
Wow.
He was in the hospital 6 months. And because he was an adult, I had to get guardianship of him. So it took a while to do that. But in the meantime, he was in the hospital kind of in a coma for being tube fed. Absolutely no response from him, nothing. The doctors basically had said to me, this is the worst kind of brain injury there is. There's nothing to do for it. No draining of bleeds or anything like that. So he said you should prepare yourself that he probably won't make it.
So let's talk a little bit about the rehabilitation process, which it sounds like was a really long process for your family.
It was. He starved first. I mean, he couldn't eat, so he was being tube fed, and there were so many, like, just when you've hit your head like that, there are so many other things that go wrong. None of his digestion worked, none of that. So
Motor function as well.
no motor function, no. The only thing he could do was write after a while. But so he was in a long-term care facility, and that's where they told me to keep him, so that because he would never recover. He was kind of, I think, what they call a vegetative state, but I had a different idea, honestly. So I went to court, got guardianship of him, asked my other kids if they wanted him home, since he was bedridden, on a tube, on a ventilator, everything. Asked if they wanted him home, even if he never got any better, and they said yes. So that's when I went about the business of bringing him home, because I thought, even if he doesn't get better, we'll be together as a family, all under the same roof. So yeah, then
And you were able to get therapies in the home, and you
therapy,
had the care in
yes,
the home.
Yep, therapy does come in the home. It did. They came and evaluated him first, and the only thing that he could do was give a thumbs up. That's all.
So let's talk about how the no-fault system helped provide rehabilitation for your son.
Well, I'll just start by saying, as we've talked about before on this show, and I talk about all the time, what we have here in America is a health insurance system that doesn't service all, and it doesn't service all types of injury. And what we have with the no-fault system is a system that provides for whatever is reasonably necessary. Mm-hmm. And I've had the privilege to represent them. There's been some fights along the way with the insurance company, but they've resolved. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that John's recovery is much of a function of the fact that he had these resources.
Oh, exactly. That's the only reason. That's the only reason, because if those weren't available, if there was no fault, he definitely would have gone to a nursing home, because that's you couldn't care for him at home with that kind of injury. You just couldn't. So he would have been in a nursing home, and his doctor at the time actually said, because when I asked him, he said the general 18 months is the length of time they spend in a nursing home, and then they mostly die of either infection or pneumonia.
And he had this motor function impairment due to the brain injury, and he was in a wheelchair for so long, but my understanding is that he had this ongoing therapy. You were diligent about it. He was. Everybody was committed to it, and now he's walking.
He's walking. He still uses a wheelchair at night, because if he's tired or if he gets sick, his balance is terrible, and he has taken a few falls here and there.
So what kind of providers or care providers were able to come into your home because of the no-fault benefits that you had?
We had 24-hour help in the home, and it was home health aides, and also therapists would come in, I think, 5 days a week.
But here's the thing, though, in terms of this no-fault reform issue. The reforms say that family can only provide 56 hours of care. Mm-hmm. What the Kenzers did is that they all committed to providing care.
I'm sorry, 56 hours?
56 hours of care
week?
Per week. So John needed 24-hour care. They came up with a way through the family to provide that. Miss Kenzer didn't work and rather cared for her son, and that's worked for them. And now the new laws have this limitation of 56 hours a week, and to make matters worse, the law is written in such a way to intend to apply to the Kenzers. So in about a year from now, they're going to have to face the reality of whether their insurance company is going to continue to fund the fact that he's getting all this care at home, which is being paid at a very reasonable price. And it's all working. But now the new law jeopardizes that possibly, right?
It does. Yep, it does, because the new law, as I understand it, says that you can't have family more than 56 hours. I am the only family that takes care of him now. And I've had caregivers. It's not as easy as all that. They're not reliable. They don't work John out hard. I mean, I'm picky about, but I want him to get better, and this is the result of when you work really hard. Right. And I even had my identity stolen with one of the, so I'm very against having them in the home. I'd love help, but it has to be reliable, and I don't want to be told you can't have any family helping, you can't have any, because that's how the law is written now. No family, no nothing. Now that won't change the fact that I still have to watch him 24/7.
Right. Well, thank you, Andrea and John, so much for coming on with us today. We really appreciate you sharing your story.
Oh, it was our pleasure.
Thanks for being here.
In the Name of Personal Injury Law is brought to you by the Sinas Dramis Law Firm.
We're back within the Name of the Law with Amy, Takura, and Steve. Today we had some really tough topics, from the catastrophic injuries that Steve's client suffered after an auto accident. Amy dealt with some holiday parenting time issues, which can be really tough to deal with. And Takura talked about that First Amendment case, which was actually quite fascinating. Do you have any thoughts you want to share?
Well, as we talked about with the holiday situation, our courts have policies. They're called reasonable rights of parenting time policies, and they set forth what those holidays are that the court feels are important that should be alternated between these parents. Parents are encouraged to add holidays if they would like to. They're encouraged to make their own arrangements if they don't like what the actual reasonable rights policy says. But again, what they want to do is they want to look at what would the child like, what would the child benefit from.
So basically the courts want everybody to get along, right?
Exactly.
They don't want people running to court for help all the time.
Correct, correct.
And I was thinking with the Kenzers, I mean, obviously their story is so relevant with the no-fault reform issue going on. But when I'm thinking about Amy's cases in the holiday time, it's about where do families want to spend time together. And the Kenzers wanted to stay together as a family, and they have.
Under the same roof.
Under the same roof, and the family's been there to care for him and has provided him great care, and now he's doing so much better. And what a great system that is, that somebody who's just all of a sudden injured in a crash, life changed forever, there is a way to give them the resources for the family to stay together and for that rehabilitation to really occur. And I guess I'm just really sad about the fact that I know people going forward after the reforms aren't going to have that same benefit and those resources.
Do we know for sure that the new law will apply to people like the Kenzers who had their accident many, many years ago?
Well, there's the issue about whether it's going to apply to them. So they're going to have to fight about that issue because it appears to intend to. But the other issue is what happens to those people who are injured after the reforms have passed? All the people injured next year, the year after that, they're not going to have what John Kenzer had.
Will you say that the new law is going to create more litigation?
I think it's just going to create more contention, and people are going to be fighting over resources, and that's what this is about, resources for care.
Takura?
You know, the outcome in this case is just another example of why I have so much faith in the jury system, right? Not an easy topic to discuss. They paid attention, though, and I think they applied the right burden of proof. And again, it just goes back to why it is that people got on a ship, crossed the pond, as folks on the other side of it would call it, and came to the United States about that First Amendment. So I'm happy about this outcome. And again, it just gives me faith in the jury system.
Right, and so even though you weren't personally involved in the criminal case, one person's First Amendment rights prevailed, it sounds like.
Indeed, indeed.
You know, we use the term rights as if they're just there, but they're only there if we let them to be there. And, you know, thankfully we still have a country here that has a whole lot of rights. Sometimes they get taken away before people know about it. Sometimes they're not all they're made up to be. But, you know, the Kenzer's rights, your client's rights, the parents' rights, I mean, these aren't to be taken for granted.
Very true, very true. Well, thank you for all of your time today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today for In the Name of the Law. Please go to WLAJ.com for more information on today's topics, and please join us next week for another informative show.